I love Green Arrow. He has been my favorite superhero for more than 20 years. And while the character's star has absolutely risen over the last 10 years or so, he is still undeniably a B-lister. And along with that comes all of the narrative and editorial mistreatment that we've come to expect. Meaning us Green Arrow fans are often left wanting for good stories revolving around our fave. It's been quite a while since Green Arrow has had a truly enthralling ongoing. In my opinion, it hasn't really been above average since Jeff Lemire was on it about a decade ago. The Williamson run was fine. I didn't really have any major issues with it beyond being a bit bland, up until Absolute Power happened and completely misunderstood his character. I cannot express enough how much I despised what Absolute Power did to Green Arrow. I know they had explanations for it. It doesn't mean the explanation was good or fit the character. But then Chris Condon and Montos took over as creative team on the ongoing, and things started to get good immediately. I cannot express to you how fantastic this run has been so far. Unfortunately, it's being canceled. Obviously, and of course, due to low readership. Once this current arc is complete, that's it. No more Green Arrow ongoing for the foreseeable future. So in a hopeless last-ditch effort to drum up interest, I thought I would do a review of the first arc in the hope that enough of you go and pick up the back issues to convince DC to keep the book going. So let's dive in. We start in issue 18, on a playground back then, full of happy children. One in particular, a boy named Kenny, finds a strange black puddle, poking at it with a stick, as children are wont to do. Kenny gets called away before he touches the stuff, but our view sinks below the earth, to the dark secret that lies hidden beneath this community's foundations. Then we jump forward into the present day, where a young man who just held up a convenience store is met with the Star City criminal's worst fear, a literal Green Arrow. Smart enough to know he's beat, the criminal surrenders, and our titular vigilante leaves him tied up for the police. Then Green Arrow heads home, done with his patrol for the night, and flips through television channels until a news broadcast catches his eye. A retired CFO of a company called Horton Chemical has been found dead, having apparently drowned in the middle of his own apartment, the only source of water around being a singular gallon jug found at the scene. The Star City police believe the murder is connected to other cases they've been investigating. Something big is bubbling up in the city. Green Arrow gears back up immediately and heads out to investigate, making his way to the scene of the CFO's murder. There he finds the jug, but also a written message. A single word. Remember. Green Arrow also finds a picture that initiates a flashback to one of the high society events he'd once attended as Oliver Queen, one at which the victim had been presented with a humanitarian award by a Senator Eustace Foley. Oliver, as usual, is incapable of holding his tongue and casts aspersions and accusations about the man's decisions, outright calling him a war criminal and accusing him of poisoning people even as he tries to make the same old excuses that they always do. This is when we learn that Oliver himself isn't so innocent in whatever happened. He himself acted as CEO of Horton Chemical for a month as a favor to a friend. He unknowingly signed off on some of the relevant papers himself. Green Arrow's reverie is broken by a creak, and he ends up squaring off with another shadowed intruder in the apartment, who quickly proceeds to chuck their flashlight at his head and tackle him. It turns out to be the same Detective Benitez he'd seen on TV earlier, and they both lower their weapons once they realize they might be able to help each other. Issue 18 ends with the detective telling GA that this killer has struck again already that night. The same senator who had presented the award to our late CFO has been found dead. Issue 19 brings us back to Kenny, watching cartoons and making himself a snack. Then suddenly, the world breaks for Kenny, and then Kenny breaks too. He falls to the floor where his mother finds him when she returns with groceries. He's breathing, but he's not responsive. She cries out for help as our title splashes and we move into the present day. Green Arrow rides in the back seat of the detective's car, her beautiful dog holding his head out the window from the passenger seat. His name is Arrow. No relation. She tells GA he can imagine he's named after him anyway. The two Arrows make fast friends, because who wouldn't love that face? Then their conversation moves on to the newest victim in the case, Senator Foley. GA mentions the senator's history of cozying up to corporate interests, of burying so-called accidents and oversights for his rich donors, like Horton Chemical. Green Arrow voices some complex feelings that a lot of us can probably relate to recently. That violence isn't what anyone wants, but it's sometimes the only consequence possible after the misdeeds of the powerful and a lack of accountability. Sometimes, when all other options have failed and things have been pushed to extremes, the fringe path is the only one available for the arc of history to bend towards justice. The detective reminds him that the killer forcibly drowned his victims with jugs of contaminated water and asks if that sounds like justice to him. She also mentioned something that they hadn't made known to the public. Strips of pH paper were found shoved down the victims' throats, the kind used to test the acidity of something. They also left a note naming themselves, the Freshwater Killer. Once they arrive, Detective Benitez escorts GA through the new crime scene to where one of their tech guys is going through the senator's security footage. Benitez gets pulled away to deal with her dog barking incessantly in her car. She goes to check on him. Meanwhile, Green Arrow looks over the shoulder of our friendly nerd, and we get our first look at the killer as they crept through the house mere hours before. He says that the killer seems to want to be seen, purposefully coming into range of multiple cameras. However, he's yet to find any footage of the killer actually exiting the premises. Then Green Arrow realizes why. The killer has not left yet. They are still in the house. Meanwhile, Detective Benitez is taking good old Arrow out for some relief in the nearby grounds. But something sinister lurks in the background. Green Arrow sees the killer creeping up behind Benitez on the cameras and rushes himself outside onto the porch where he aims his bow. Then Arrow hears something and goes berserk in the way a startled dog does, and Benitez gets hit across the head. Arrow defends his owner and scares away the killer before they can hit the detective again, forcing them to flee. This gives Green Arrow the shot he needs, and he fires an impact arrow, aka the slightly less goofy replacement for the boxing glove arrow. It knocks the killer down from the fence they're climbing, and the issue ends with the reveal of our killer's face, as well as a plea for mercy that comes with a weak-voiced apology. We return to Kenny and his mother at the start of our next issue, at the doctor's office where the young boy is being diagnosed with epilepsy. His mother asks where this came from. Kenny had never had any issues before. The doctor tells her that his blood tests came back with high levels of a chemical called benzene, off the charts in his words. We leave Kenny and his mother as they try to internalize the new information, our story returning to the current day. Our killer sits quietly in a police interrogation room. The narration informs us that her name is Francine Dory, a local resident with no record beyond a few promptly paid speeding tickets. She's also been diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia, and the prognosis does not seem good. She's been working as a middle school guidance counselor for the past 12 years. The very picture of an average citizen. The only incriminating evidence in her old car were a few extra jugs of the contaminated water. Nothing else. Green Arrow asks to look through the file that the police had gathered on Francine, hoping to see something that might point him in the right direction. Then he spots it. She was a part of the settlement of a lawsuit filed against Horton Chemical by the freshwater community. Apparently the corporation threw a not insignificant amount of money at the case to get it buried. They're interrupted by Francine banging up against the one-way mirror, making choking, gurgling sounds and crying out in pain as something greenish spews from her mouth. They call medical and try to help her, but Francine dies moments later. Green Arrow empathizes with the dead woman, a normal person who had been victimized and now died alone in a cage. Detective Benitez retorts that she was a serial killer, and GA reminds her that even accused serial killers are owed due process. Despite her crimes, Green Arrow can't let go of his compassion for her. She was a guidance counselor, not a hitman, he says. She had her whole life stolen from her in Freshwater. This divide is insurmountable in the moment, and GA storms out, leaving Benitez to vent her frustration in her own way. Back in his apartment, Oliver calls his better half, Dinah Lance, the Black Canary. They talk out the situation even as she handles her own. Here we learn that the freshwater case was specifically an environmental disaster caused by illegal dumping of toxic waste. It was in the news enough for Dinah to know what he's referring to. Ollie explains that Horton had sold one of their dump sites to the county and helped finance the building of a new community, supposedly to provide affordable housing and a safe community for the city. Oliver goes through his usual refrain, beating himself up for his mistakes as they come back to bite him, specifically his failure to be more thorough in his brief stint as Horton Chemical's CEO. Francine lost her home, then her child to cancer, then her husband left her and she had nothing. There was no justice. No charges brought against the people responsible for harming so many. Their conversation ends, and Ollie tries and fails to blow off steam with some target shooting on the roof, storming inside when his focus fails. Issue 20 ends with Ollie alone in his unlit apartment, the freshwater killer primed for a headblow behind him. Issue 21 opens on a town hall meeting held in the past at the Freshwater Community Center. The people of Freshwater demand answers from their local senator. Their children are coming down with epilepsy and cancer. They want a way out of the health hazard they were tricked into living in. Kenny's mother, Brenda, speaks up, explaining her story. She's a single mother who grew up in the slums of Star City. She swore she would not let her child grow up like that. So when the flyer for the new Freshwater Community reached her, it seemed like a sign, a golden opportunity. It was supposed to be a way out of her circumstances, a chance for her son to live in a clean and safe community. Only to find out that the house she bought for him, the land she worked so hard to get so she could raise her son, is the very thing that's poisoning him. She begins to cry as she simply begs them for help. They can't stay there, but they have sunk their entire savings into Freshwater. They can't afford to move back out on their own. We leave this flashback and return to the present day with a singular image of Kenny's angry face as he listens to his mother plead for mercy from the people who made them victims. Back in Oliver's apartment, his training and experience kick in, and he turns his assailant's attack against them. Oliver asks how they aren't dead, but the killer just keeps coming at him rather than answering him. The fight goes on until Oliver smashes the killer through the window, dangling them out over the street a few stories below. A panicked voice begs him for help. Oliver throws them back into the room and demands they talk, throwing a few fists into their masked face as further motivation. The attacker gives in and takes off their mask, begging Oliver not to hit him again. The man's name is Ted Shepard, and he came to teach Oliver a lesson for what he did at Horton Chemical. Oliver tries to explain himself, but Ted just shows him a document that authorized Horton Chemical to sell the land that would become Freshwater Community. It was signed by Oliver personally. Meanwhile, Detective Benitez is doing her own research into the Freshwater story when her partner comes in to tell her that they'd gotten another victim. Another Horton executive named Emmanuel Dreyer has been found dead, though the body is old enough that it could still have been Dory who did it. Benitez says she's going to check out the remains of the Freshwater Community, leaving her partner to handle the new crime scene. Back with Oliver, we find him and his assailant waiting for the cops, with Ted tied up. Oliver called it in as a simple B&E. He continues to try and plead his case to Ted, swearing he did not sign that particular paper. Ted is not hearing it. He tells Oliver that it's not over, that they are not done yet, specifically using the plural pronoun. The issue ends with Benitez heading to Freshwater, where a multitude of people have gathered, dressed in the same garb as the Freshwater killer. Issue 22 starts at a meeting, where an old commercial centering around the Freshwater community is being played to remind the gathered people what they and their families had been promised. Kenny is speaking to the people, now an adult and mourning his mother, who was taken from him by breast cancer only a month before. He's gathered them ostensibly to start a support group for the victims of Freshwater. He commiserates with the other victims over the lack of repercussions for their victimizers. He says he wants to make the world remember what was done to them, that a few checks cashed are nowhere near enough to balance out the damage that was done. He wants to make real change, and he has an idea on how to do it. Back in the present day, Oliver is giving his statement to Benitez's partner, who came about the break-in that he called in. When asked why he didn't mention that the assailant was dressed as the Freshwater killer, Oliver claims he has no idea what that is. He doesn't follow the news. Oliver eventually escapes the conversation with the detective and makes his way to his garage, where he gears up and rides out as Green Arrow. Meanwhile, Detective Benitez is exploring the old Freshwater community with our favorite dog, when suddenly Arrow starts to growl at the shadows. She cries out, demanding to know who's there. Then suddenly, she's surrounded by people dressed just like the killer. She says they're supposed to be dead. They say they are. They all are. And they can show her what they mean. She turns down the offer and sicks Arrow on them, who readily defends his owner. But even a big dog like Arrow can't fight a whole group, and they quickly gain an advantage on the animal, pummeling it together. Green Arrow is on his way, screaming through the streets on his bike until he finally arrives at Freshwater. He finds Benitez's car empty and begins to investigate when he hears a whining. Then Arrow limps up to him. He puts the dog back into the car to rest and recover from his injuries as Green Arrow goes out to find his mom. Benitez begins to wake up amongst people arguing and opens her eyes to discover they've bound her in rope and are dragging her to the old school building. It's where you go when you need to learn a lesson. This issue ends with Green Arrow climbing an old utility pole, using the vantage point to pinpoint the school as the only building shining lit in the night. The next issue begins at the beginning of the Freshwater Killers. Kenny hands out the masks and red coats, and gives each of them a piece of pipe that had been cut from the old houses. the very pipes that had carried the poison into their homes. He tells them that the pipes are only to incapacitate their victims. Killing them like that would be too quick and easy. He also hands out jugs of the contaminated water. It will be their weapon and their symbol. Back in the present, Green Arrow approaches the school through the heavy rain. He takes out the lone guard from range and scales the building with a grapple arrow. Looking down through a hole in the roof, he sees the freshwater killers gathered around Detective Benitez, who has been left dangling upside down above a pool of contaminated water. Someone orders her to be dropped into the water. Another of them isn't so sure. She's just a cop, but the first says that she's still working for the people who let this happen to them. This water made them what they are, changed their lives forever. Now it's going to change hers. Then an arrow flies in, bursting into smoke. Ollie swings into action as they scatter for their weapons. He cuts Benitez down and she twists away from the water as GA fights their assailants. Finally, it's only Kenny left, and he unmasks himself. He tells Green Arrow to stop treating them like some supervillain cabal. They're just people who've had enough. GA says that they took it too far. They weren't happy just hurting the people who wronged them. They had to hurt the people whose job it was to stop them. He asks him, where's the line? Where's the justice in hurting the entire city? Kenny scoffs. Don't talk to him about justice, he says. His mother got cancer and needed chemo. Insurance wouldn't pay for it, and the Horton payout had been long gone. Justice is useless to someone like Kenny. He throws his mask at GA as a distraction and leaps at him wielding an industrial light. He beats Green Arrow, says that this is what happens to happy children when the world turns its back on them. Green Arrow is on the ground, writhing with broken ribs. Kenny rages and moves to hit him again, but Benitez comes up behind him and strikes him in the head. In the aftermath, Benitez asks if GA is okay. He just says that it's sad to see these people's pain. They were just normal, hard-working folk who had been lied to, left behind, and forgotten. They were made into ghosts. Never able to move past their pain, they instead turned it into their power. They let it subsume them and become their identity. GA can't imagine a more rotten world than one that lets that happen. I tend to agree. Our final issue begins with Kenny speaking to his mother at her grave. He laments that a person as pure and innocent as her could be so unfairly taken from the people who loved her. He tells her that he knows she wouldn't approve of what he's about to do, but he has to do something. She knew she didn't have all the answers. Maybe this is something she would have been wrong about. Back in the present, Kenny is in prison, where he's being taken to speak to a visitor. The visitor turns out to be none other than Oliver Queen. Oliver asks him just to listen. Kenny begrudgingly agrees. Oliver first gives him his condolences for his late mother and admits to his culpability in the situation. He can't condone what Kenny did, but he understands. They wanted to make change. They wanted blood. He gets that, and he knows he would have felt the same. But blood alone isn't going to change things, not in any meaningful way. So Oliver has started the Brenda Gordon Environmental Group, an organization with a mission to rebuild, repurpose, and innovate using renewable resources. They're going to completely level the freshwater community and rebuild something better on top of it. Kenny agrees that while it won't do much to change how he feels personally, it is something. Something more than they'd ever been given before. Oliver walks away from the window to be met with Detective Benitez introducing herself to him. Remember, she never met him outside of his costume before this. She questions him about his connection to Horton Chemical and his reasons for leaving. When asked about it, Oliver admits to going easy on the freshwater killer that broke into his home. Benitez asks why. She'd think he'd be more cutthroat with someone trying to kill him. Oliver responds in perfect Oliver fashion. I'm going to read it verbatim here. And why is that? Because he's got less, that means he is? Or because I'm supposed to be part of the upper crust? I'm supposed to, what, look down on somebody like him? Nah, sister, not me. Push came to shove, I'd be standing alongside people like them because they're what's real. Not some imaginary figure in a bank account or the baubles you keep on a shelf that signify worth. I might be rich. Yeah, it's true. But I've lost everything too. And that's when I learned that the most important things in life, those most valuable things, they aren't worth a red cent. They part ways after Benitez gives him her card and Ollie heads home. He makes a stop along the way with the intention of ruining someone's day. We see his bike pull up to a security checkpoint without a rider. A wide shot shows him traversing the roof of the security stand as the guard calls in the phantom bike. The CEO of Horton Chemical stands in his office, looking out the window over the city. Then the glass breaks as an arrow flies through. Then another, and another. Then the Green Arrow himself bursts through the glass, tackling the older man. He pulls an arrow from his quiver and holds it like a dagger over the man's face. GA once helped his family find a killer, he reminds him, and afterwards he was left in charge of the company because he was supposed to be better, but he was just as corrupt as the rest. The CEO begs for his life. GA slams the arrow down into the floor next to his head, into a sheet of paper with a list of names. He tells the CEO that those names are his next big investment, that he's going to spend whatever money necessary to take care of them, because if he doesn't, the threat is left hanging in the air, implied. I hope you see now why I speak so highly of this run. For the first time in years, we actually have Green Arrow stories that are attempting to tackle and start discussions on real-world issues around the broken system that we live in. Is it perfect? No, of course not. It falls into that same trap that they always do, where the bad guy with a point goes too far so that they can actually be the bad guy and have a reason to be stopped by our hero. But it's also aware of that more than these stories usually are, and it tries to address that disparity in a few different ways. Firstly is Oliver's own complicity in the situation. I do feel this could have been more of a focus in the story, but regardless, it's there, and it means that whoever you are relating to the most, whether it's Kenny and the Freshwater Killers or it's still just Green Arrow, your fave, your hero, your protagonist still has culpability and responsibility in the situation going on. And hopefully that means that the reader is going to reflect at least a little bit on their own culpability and their own responsibility in regards to the system that they live within every day. And of course, Oliver not only admits to that culpability, but takes steps to address the issues that he helped create, rather than just leaving it to the system to return to the status quo after an impassioned but ultimately impotent speech like these stories normally do. And the current arc that comes after this is proving just as phenomenal. And it's tackling issues just as important and heavy, like our society's heartless reaction to the victims of addiction. So please, if any of this has interested you, go to your local comic shop and try to buy the back issues, at least for the current arc that started at issue 25, if not for the entire run starting at issue 18. And while we're at it, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll be bringing more discussions and recaps of overlooked comic storylines to you guys very soon.